Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome and to introduce Gabriela Adameşteanu, who is one of Romania's leading novelists. She's going to talk a little later about her novel and read an extract in Romanian, and I'll follow her reading with a fragment of a translation. But before that, I thought I would show you a few slides on a PowerPoint just to give you some background to Gabriela's life and her work. And I hope Gabriela will correct me if any of the details on it are wrong. So if we just run through these slides, the novel about which Gabriela is going to talk is Dimineaţa, pierdută, Wasted Morning. As you can see there from the slide, it was published in 1983. It's been translated into 11 languages, and indeed a Turkish translation has been brought to my attention this evening. So, Gabriela, you'll be interested to see the version in Turkish, which a student has brought along for us. So, the translation that I shall be reading from a little later is by Patrick Camilla, who is a renowned translator, not just from Romanian, but from French as well. And indeed, he translated Mihai Sebastian's memoir, which was published in Chicago about 10 years ago. As the slide says, Gabriela's novel has been mounted in a stage production by Catalina Buzeanu and continues to be staged in Bucharest on a regular basis. So Gabriela was born in Târgu Ocna, which is in Moldavia. I'll show you a map in a second. In 1960, or between 60 and 65, she studied, as you can see, at the University of Bucharest, graduating with a thesis on Marcel Proust. And Moldova is over there in the, let me move slightly over here in the east of the country, in the county of Bacău. There's the town. So Gabriela moved over to work or to study initially in Pitești, I think it was, wasn't it, Gabriela, which is there in the west of the, in the southwest of the country. She worked at the Editura Politică publishing house, which then became the Editură Științifică și Enciclopedică, and began contributing to the Romanian literary journals, which I've listed there. Her first novel is a story called Drumul, egal, fiecărei, zile, The Equal Way of Every Day, which deals with intellectual survival in a provincial environment. Perhaps she'll talk a little about that during our Q&A session later. But this novel won the prize of the Romanian Academy. Her other... Sorry, did I skip one there? Yes, after 83, she worked as an editor for Cartea Românească, which is one of the principal publishing houses in Romania at the time. And it was here that her novel Dimineaţa, pierdută was published in 83. She was one of a group of writers who sent in November 1989 a letter of protest to the president of the Writers' Union regarding the restrictions placed on writers in the latter part of the Ceausescu regime, and especially referring to the banning of Mircea Dinescu, a poet. Our other literary works are listed there. And again, if you have questions about those, please feel free to put them during the Q&A session. And her most recent novel is Provizorat, Provisional State, Bucharest, 2010. I've added onto the PowerPoint a few pictures of Bucharest just to give you some background to the novel itself, because it really is a tapestry of Romanian urban society from the First World War up until the mid-1980s. So for those of you who are not familiar with Bucharest in that period, I just selected a few photographs. You can see that the town or the city developed very extensively in the 1930s. The influence of French architecture is very noticeable in Bucharest, and can still be seen despite the destruction that was wrought on the town by Ceausescu in his mania to systematize, which was the term used officially, to systematize Bucharest in the 1980s. Pictures which I think evoke some of the atmosphere of Bucharest at the time. You can see that photograph was taken in 1959. Here's a photograph of Bucharest outside the history faculty in the center of Bucharest. Again, 1960s Bucharest, also from 64, in fact, one of the main boulevards. I think this is, maybe it's Magheru, yeah, boulevard. A picture again which is, I think, eloquent of Bucharest, and you see the little gypsy person there on the middle of the zebra crossing. You'll find gypsies quite often in the center of Romanian towns. And here a rather less colourful picture in many ways, one of the interminable queues that people formed in order to get basic foodstuffs in the mid-1980s, owing to the austerity program which Ceausescu imposed upon the population. So I think that's the last one, yeah. Well, Gabriela, maybe you'd like to come up to the microphone and read, or this one, and read a fragment from your novel. I'm going to read a different fragment in English translation so that you've got a broader view, perhaps, of the novel.
I would like, first of all, to thank you that you are here and you came to listen to me. Of course, I'd like to thank to Mrs. Jennifer Long and to Professor Deletant. They are so important for this event. And I know from since many years Professor Deletant, I read his books, and I admire what he made for the Romanian culture and history. And of course, I want to thank to Romanian Cultural Institute and to Romanian Embassy who helped me to be here. Before reading, I would like to explain a little how it is this novel. Here is the last Romanian edition in a posh edition, but it seems to be smaller because the letters are small too. In fact, in that novel there are two novels. One of them is the events take place in the time of Ceausescu. There are 80s, in the 80s, and the other part describes the atmosphere before the First World War in Romania. I named in my mind this second part. I named the retro novel. It is a novel that I discovered recently, that I was influenced by not a lot, but I could feel for myself that this part of the novel is related to a novel of Henry James, Portrait of the Lady. But about this I will tell perhaps later. Now I would like to read. And I chose another excerpt than the excerpt that will read Professor Deletant, because I wanted to excuse for the public who cannot understand Romanian, but this is from the other part of the novel. Afară, prin ferestrele limpezi, catifeaua albastră a clematitelor pe cerul luminos, roz pal, auriu. De desubt, hățișul stufos al glicinei șerpuind printre nodurile bătrânului nuc. Jur împrejur, solzii lucioși ai iederei, care înveșmântează fastuos pereții, lăsând numai deasupra burlanului cu cap de leu să sticlească impudică goliciunea albă a zidului. Jos de tot în întuneric, lespezile de piatră înfundate în pământul gras, acoperite de mușchiul verde-negru. Aici, penumbra dulce a salonului, împăienjenându-se de amurg, mobila de mahon care nu mai strălucește a nou, conversația profesorului Mironescu, încălcând cu bună știință codul monden care i-ar cere să rămână spumoasă, agreabilă și superficială. Iar dincolo de cămașa cu culer tare, gheara puiului de vulpe, care îi se zbate sălbăticit la piept, care își înfige tot mai adânc în carnea lui ghearele însângerate. Însă pe el, la fel ca pe micul spartan, niciun tremur al glasului n-are să-l trădeze, va vorbi, înfășurându-se tot mai tare în dantelăria pe care i-o împletește rivalului. Acesta este mediocrul tânăr Ielomițeanu, să nu se mai mintă singur, încercând să se apropie, atât de aproape să ajungă încât să-i poată pipăi celuilalt mișcările sufletului. Doar vedem modul nesolidar, lipsit de politețuri, cu care se tratează între ei oamenii noștri de bine. În fiecare zi aflăm altă dezvăluire scandaloasă, altă mașinație a unor persoane considerate până acum în afara oricăror bănuieli, altă afacere oneroasă în care sunt amestecați oameni pentru a căror onestitate am fi garantat. În permanență se spun secrete pe care într-o oră le va ști orașul și se vorbește interminabil despre venalitate, bani publici deturnați, corupție, iarăși venalitate și trădare, ori întregi de cozerii și taclare, din care cine mai rămâne neatins, dacă nu de insultă și calomnie, măcar de o insinuație subțire. Pentru că de la dușmani trecem la amicii aflați de față, răul nefiind, bineînțeles, numără în tabăra celorlalți. La fiecare dintre ai noștri am observat contraziceri între spusă și faptă, josnice lașități, mici ticăloșii, alianțe rușinoase. Despre fiecare dintre ai noștri am putea vorbi destul și chiar vorbim, pentru că îi cunoaștem mai de aproape. De ce însă și la această vârstă, la care iluziile ar fi trebuit să-i dispară, pe el încă îl mai chinuiesc zvonurile rele ale orașului? De ce neputința sa structurală de a imagina răul îl hărțuiește în aceeași măsură ca și firea credulă și influențabilă? Calomnie, calomnie, îi sfidează el de fiecare dată pe bârfitori, altfel știind prea bine cât de repede se convinge de ce aude. Un zâmbet tremurând sfidător, de puș slăbănoc, care se teme să nu fie luat în serios pentru că știe puterile puține. Este atât de prins de propriile fraze încât chiar binecunoscuta bătaia pendulei îl face să tresară. Ceilalți care de mult urmăreau pe furiș Cadranu au și ei o mică tresărire. Fețele lor nu se întorc spre el însă decât atunci când ultimul sunet se pierde, desfăcându-se fâșii în aer. Există, desigur, printre noi destui care deplâng această irosire românească. Finețurile de observație, umorul, formulările memorabile pe care le înghite uitarea. Dar nimeni nu-mi pare a se ne liniști îndeajuns că din atâtea vorbe rele, il en restera toujours quelque chose. Noi nu am creat un asemenea proverb, pentru că noi nu calumniem niciodată, noi nu avem nicio îndoială că știm în fiecare clipă tot adevărul despre ceilalți. Profesorul Mironescu își desprinde de pe nas ochelarii aburiți și, ștergându-i îndrăjit cu patista, continuă mai șovăielnic. Avem o înțelegere cât se poate de sceptică și de pozitivă de cum se petrec lucrurile pe acest pământ. Lumea este un panie de crab, iar tu trebuiește să dai din coade, să mai închizi un ochi, să mai pleci capul, să te faci frate cu dracu până treci puntea. Astfel se irosește des pomenita inteligență pasivă românească, discreditând lucrul fiecăruia mai înainte ca acela să fi reușit să-l ducă până la capăt. Numai că așarnându-ne împotriva omeneștilor scăderi ale semenilor, ne discredităm și principiile. Aruncând în permanență oamenii în derizoriu, vom sfârși prin a arunca și idealurile. Thank you.
As I said at the beginning, the novel is very much a picture, a portrait of Romanian society across something like 70 or 80 years, and the portrait is composed of the various conversations that the heroine of the novel, Vica Delcă, has with the various characters in it. I'm going to read an extract which Gabriela has chosen. As she said, it's different from the one in Romanian, but it's a conversation that she has, or based on a conversation that she has with one of her interlocutors as she travels around Bucharest on this wasted morning. The old woman was sitting and talking about the boy. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You know, Vica, when Nicky brought Ivona back from the hospital and I saw it was a boy, it was as if I was seeing a baby for the first time. I felt so sorry for him, the little helpless thing. And just then he sneezed. I don't know why, maybe because of the light or a sudden draft. And he made a little movement with his hands, like this, like a grown person. It surprised me so much, I'm not sure why. He had the face of a little old man, like most babies do in their first month, but I thought he was beautiful as I watched him wake up and open his eyes. If I'd believed in God, I'd have said he was a miracle. I couldn't understand how he'd suddenly appeared amongst us. I felt kind of intimidated by the way he looked around him and seemed to take everything in. Ivona was taking quite a long time to recover from the cesarean, so I was the one who fed him, bathed him, and learned to change his nappies. I wouldn't let anyone else do it instead. And when Ivona was back to normal and started to hover around him, I saw that she didn't have a clue what to do. The poor girl's completely hopeless around the house, clumsier than a man. So when I saw how she held the baby and how she didn't have the patience to feed him with a spoon, and one day nearly scolded him in the bath, well, God forgive me, but I got really upset with her. It made me angry to think that she was his mother, that she brought him into the world. She sat there motionless on the soiled slipcover, cushions and rug, talking for hours about the boy. It was then that she blurted something out about her husband's arrest, and she cried at the memory. Thick tears rolled down her cheeks as she talked and talked. The times were hard. My turn will soon come, very soon, Lulu told me one evening. He knew the precise moment when they'd come to get him. He worked it out logically from the sequence of arrests in the army, and he wanted to prepare me. We spent days emptying drawers, burning papers, letters and books, so the Securitate didn't find anything. They took the sofa apart, tore up the floorboards, leafed through the books, but they didn't find a thing that could be used against him. Of course, they didn't mind finding you guilty without any evidence, but he wasn't in one of the first batches they arrested. As far as I could make out, they played a waiting game and kept wearing him down with interrogations. Pretty soon he fell ill. He was never actually tried and sentenced, so it was easy enough to rehabilitate him in the 60s, along with all the others. Aha, so that's how you got to draw his pension, Vica thought. And now the old woman was coming out with it. She no longer had any reason to keep it quiet. She only kept her mouth shut for her grandson's sake, so that he might be promoted in his job and allowed to join the party. After all, Tudor certainly had a brain in his head, and he was ambitious as well. Always with his head in a book. Yes, they hoped things would work out for him. The first time he went abroad, he just looked around Germany, Holland, or wherever. Mrs. Christide, their neighbour, said she was sure he'd stay there, but he came back. The next time, though, he left for good, so why should his grandmother have held her tongue any longer? If we heard a car stop in the street after dark, we'd sit still and look at each other, white as a sheet. I'll never forget that year as long as I live. How long the seconds seemed as we waited for a knock on the door or the sound of footsteps on the stairs. We didn't dare look out of the window to see whether it was that dreaded black van. You know Mr. Romanescu, don't you, Vica? Well, even after 10 years in prison, he was still as sharp and humorous as ever. And do you know what he told me? At least in prison, I didn't have to worry that they'd come and arrest me. Of course, when I heard their steps in the corridor, I'd be worried stiff that it was my turn to be taken for interrogation or sent to Jilava or one of the camps on the Danube-Black Sea Canal. It's 10 years now since they let me out, but even today there are some evenings at home when I think I can hear their steps on the stairs. You remember how they used to come up, gun in hand. Nowadays, all kinds of young people ask me what it was like, some straight out, others beating around the bush. But I always say I won't tell them anything. I have many reasons for that, and one is they simply wouldn't understand what it was like. But Mr. Romanescu did tell me, the poor man. He knew what we'd been through, so he told me how afraid he'd been before his arrest. Some people were so scared that they didn't sleep at home. They'd wander the streets, move from pillar to post, bury themselves somewhere in the provinces. I remember one old man who started lining up at 5 every morning. He knew they were hardly likely to arrest you in a line, so he'd spent whole days like that. When he saw one of them sniffing around, he'd go off and join another line. The poor man. They picked him up, of course, in the end. A few months after they came for Lulu, just a few months, Margot was denounced and put on trial as well. They kicked Ivona out of college. The Italian school, where she taught a few hours a week, was closed down, and she couldn't find work anywhere. She'd traipse all over Bucharest to give private lessons at 3 lei an hour, hardly enough to pay for her shoes to be resold. I also gave some lessons, German and French, as well as looking after Tudor. If it hadn't been for him, I don't think I'd have lived through all the ordeals. Ah, well, everyone meets their match. She was always a fiery, passionate woman. You could tell that from the way she laughed, and how her eyes would light up at the sight of some food, or when she drew on a cigarette. Then I understood how you can tremble with fear that something might happen to a child, how you can suffer with him all the diseases he catches. Something gave me strength, Vica. I felt it every morning. If I'd been a believer, I'd have said it was God. Something gave me strength all those years. I don't think I even cried once, so that Ivona wouldn't see me. I had to be healthy and to avoid brooding on everything that had happened. I couldn't moan and groan or think about all I'd lost, because without me, Ivona and her innocent child would be all alone in the world. She certainly loved the boy, perhaps more than anything else on earth. And after he'd gone, there was no longer any point in holding her tongue. It wouldn't be of any use to him, because there was no way he was ever going to come home. So the old woman sat there talking and talking. She reckoned that she didn't have long to go and would never set eyes on him again. His mother and that creep of a father would see him in Germany, Austria, America, wherever he landed up, only he knows where. But she would never set eyes on him again. I'd like to think that I will, but I can't bring myself to believe it. If I had the gift of faith, I'd be sure we'll meet again one day. But it's as if I feel that that will never happen. And she never did set eyes on him again. I'm going to take advantage of my position as moderator just to ask Gabriela 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll open the floor to you. Gabriela, in respect, especially of the passage I just read where you mentioned the securitate, I wondered if you encountered any problems with the censor in Romania.
Myself, no. But I grew up in a family where even my parents didn't want to speak louder and try to
to hide.
Yeah, to hide the reality, the political reality to the children. I remember this heavy atmosphere, and the part of stories and sometimes only news about people in prison. And when I was a teenager in the college, not in college, before,
in school.
After the Hungarian Revolution, when there were many people arrested, I had an uncle who was arrested and died very soon, after some months in jail. He was a brilliant doctor, and I was impressed by all these stories. I listened in my childhood and a little later. The reality, in the same time, I want to add that my father was teacher of history, and it was atmosphere in my house, how to say, familiar to what happened in not only in my family, not only in my town, but abroad.
I read the novel many years ago in Romanian, but one thing intrigued me, and that was, why did it take so long for it to appear in English translation? Is there a history to the problem, well, not the problem necessarily, but to the process of getting it translated and published in the United States?
I was, when I write the novel, I didn't think that one day could be translated. It was in the 70s, 80s, and I had any connection abroad, as you know, and it was incredible for me. After the revolution, for 10 years, even more, I was editor-in-chief of a magazine, 22 magazine, and I spent all my energies there. It was very interesting for me, that time, the time for journalism, and when I could understand the world, the actual world. But I was disconnected to the literature, and I didn't read books, fiction books. It was not an exception. As you remember, the public was interested in memories, in essays, less in fiction because the reality was stronger than what happens in Romania in that years. Those years was more interesting than fiction, and I became to be interested again in literature after 2000. 2000 and even and I can remember in 2005 I had the most important translation of my book in French. It was translated by Gallimard, and this translation was like a business card for the book. And after that,
yes.
But it takes time, but not so long time. In 7 years now, I have those editions. With English is not so simple to have a translation, and when I arrived here. Even before, I discovered that in Europe, 80% of translations are from, in fiction, are from Anglo-Saxon and American fictions. But the opposite, yes. In United States, the percent is 6 or even 3%, yeah, including academic works also. Then really I was lucky to have this translation.
The translation into English actually has appeared already in the United States, but it hasn't appeared in Britain, has it? As far as I'm aware, is there a British publisher?
I don't know, but as I understand from my Romanian colleagues in England is even more difficult than in the United States to be published.
Yeah. I was wondering, reading or rereading the book, whether the characters or some of the characters were actually based on people you'd met yourself. Were they?
Usually I try to avoid the answer for this.
That's why I asked the question.
Of course, I made this in Romania, but when I'm abroad, I became a little more sincere, and this question is always about Vica, and of course I had a model for the language, of course, but not exactly for the character, for the language, and after that, you know, by language, the character became more and more fictional. All the other characters had no models, really, but I mixed the traits of different persons. And situations. I listen a lot of story in that time, and I read books. What I could discover in that time. It was not simple to find the books you remember.
I was thinking, reading the Romanian, that you give the idioms, or several idioms, of social strata in Romania, and that was one of the attractive things about the novel.
Yes, it seems that I had in that time, perhaps I have now, but now I'm less interested in this, because now when I had the hope to be translated, I understand that it is a difficulty for the translator to put all the details of the language and argot and so on. But in that time, when I didn't think about a translation, I became really so interested in the differences of the language, because each person has his special language, and the families have their how to say, vocabulary.
Yeah, their vocabulary.
Yeah, and for Wasted Morning, it was I had to learn the language of the characters from the beginning of the century, 20th century, and it was for me a mixture between what I discover in books, in memoirs, and also listening the old persons. I could see different, how to say, phrases and words, unusual for me, but who came from the past. And it was like to learn a foreign language that time. And I became crazy about it. It was a big pleasure for me. But very simple was to put the language of Vica, oral language, and sometimes avec cruel, or avec de gros mots, comment dire?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was not, Vica was not so polite sometimes, and my family, bourgeois family, was not comfortable with my character.
The crude, yes.
And even one uncle asked me, but my dear, where did you learn?
Well, we have a microphone which will circulate for those of you in the audience who'd like to put questions to, or a question to Gabriela. If you wish to do so, could you just give your name?
Hello, my name is Rhoda Septilisi, and I wanted to thank you for this wonderful presentation, both of you. I was very touched by your beautiful use of language. Having come myself from a very intellectual and elitist family, and used to a beautiful Romanian, I'm appalled by the level at which it has been debased today. So I was very pleased to see that from the excerpts you read, and I'm looking forward to reading your books. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Adameșteanu, my name is Tiberiu Dianu. I'm from the Foreign Service Institute. I found out that you spent a lot of years in the city of Pitești. Myself, I spent 20 years there. Everybody knows that in the city of Pitești there are the remnants of the former Pitești prison, cell block number 4 hospital, which I recently, although a resident of Pitești for so many years, only recently I visited, and the experience was ravishing. My question is this: in your novels, has this Pitești experiment, although from another era, from the 49, the 50s, early 50s, has played a role, even subliminal, in your novels?
Thank you for the question. I lived there. When I arrived in Pitești, I was 4 years. And when I lived more or less the city, I was 18. We were not from Pitești. We came there, and it was for a time. Even my father died there. My father died when I was very young, and also my mother. Really, I didn't know if my parents knew about the prisoner from Pitești. I had no information about what happens there. Even I lived in those years there. I was. I remember then. My family used to make walks around the towns, not in the towns but around, and it was a house, a big house that I imagined, because I was a kid. I imagined that this is a castle because by the story for children. Sometimes I am scared thinking that that house, that castle could be the terrible prison of Pitești. But when I worked at Wasted Morning, I had no information about the prison from Pitești.
My name is Dr. Louis Wright from the library, and I got up at 4:30 this morning to take 2 Romanian friends to the airport. So I'm a little tired, but I want to ask you this. It's a question that is often asked of other East European countries and writers who experienced both before 1989 and after 1989. And I'm wondering, in your case, is it easier to write now in Romania, or was it easier to write before 1989?
Thank you for your question. You know, to write is, I think it is the same thing. You can write at your home if you want, and even in the past, even now. The problem is after that to publish what you write, and if you publish, the problem is what happens with your book. And it is not my case, because more or less I have now some writings and name as a writer. But for a young writer, it's not simple. If he came from not from the capital, if he came from province, and it's not impossible. In the last 10 years, I think, the public rediscover fiction. The public is less interested in the papers, not in television. Is very interested in television, but less on the papers, and it is better for fictional writers now. There are some program of Romanian Cultural Institute who help the good books to be translated, paying the translation. It was the case with Wasted Morning too. But you know, to be a writer is not so important in our society and even in the world now. To be a writer before was more prestigious, if I can say. Even it was more complicated to publish your book and to make your voice to be listened. But it was more, a writer was more interesting for the public than now.
Yes, Aurelia.
I don't want.
Oh, they need it.
I want to thank you very much, and I have to admit that I have not read your novels, but I want to congratulate you for something else which you, in a way, put down. You are an example what a publication can do for a public who is thirsty to know world literature. La revue 22 was unique, an unique experiment as I saw it as a student in Romania, as a young person, because it published fragments from the world literature. We don't have such a prestigious review here in the capital of the United States. We have New York in New York, which publish only American and local, very little towards the world. We are more provincial than your review of 22, which was marvelous, an example of courage in those times. I left Romania in '61, so we didn't even know the name of Ceausescu, but we knew the communism started already, and your revista 22 was a marvelous example. Now, to answer here to my friend, your language is superb, and what I saw in your example, the fragment that you read, I saw something else than what she saw. Very interesting. Ionesco used to say that if we saw the same thing in a work of art, it does not deserve the title of a masterpiece, of a great work of art. I saw something completely different than what we saw. Perhaps I misunderstood you. What I saw in your search for language and thought was that Franțuzit, Romanian Franțuzit, yes, who instead of using the Romanian înverșunat, uses așarne, which shocks me, you know, though they, and there are others, the termination of some noun in țiune, which reminds me of Caragiale's. So you, for me, listening to you, you penetrated that epoch, which was at the end of Caragiale's time, of that Romanian Franțuzit, you know, fațadă vopsită la Paris, și departe de, and far from the language of the people. So, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ana Maria Banu, and I think this is a good follow-up question to that. You have mentioned Henry James at the beginning, and having found out now that you wrote a dissertation on Marcel Proust, that seems to justify somehow some of the beautiful turns of style and this multiple focalization that through which you present your characters. Are there any other authors you would name as influences? And then this would be one question, and then a sub-question. Where do you usually look for inspiration? Or how? I mean, I know this is as for you as a novelist, and I don't know, how do you conduct your research since you've been an academic?
I discovered the influence of Henry James on this novel recently, because I was in this was an opportunity to arrive here. I was invited in New York at a festival, PEN World Voices Festival, and I was involved in 3 events. And the first event had I was in a panel where the question was why we read the classics, and the classic was a book, and I had to specify, me and the other authors, I had to specify how I was influenced by a classic book. And it was not a new question, but I thought before about this question, but in my mind was that the writers that I loved very much, like Tolstoy, like Faulkner, or like later Philip Roth or Joyce Carol Oates. I cannot find any trait of influence on my work. And I remember that in a French review, it was mentioned the name of Henry James. Because after the French translation, I had some articles in different papers, French papers, and in one of them it was described the atmosphere from my novel like in Henry James, and then I read Portrait of the Lady, discovering a lot of things were in common with my even the tea time and the discussion about the identity. Of course, at Henry James, it is a discussion about the differences between American and America and Europe and America and England, but it was a discussion and the facts are not so important than the discussion. There were long scene discussion, and the facts are, how to say, put in a short space, and the narrator goes very quickly to other scene. And even I discovered that my important character from this second part, Profesorul Mironescu, from his speech I read, has the consumption, yeah, like Ralph, one of the main characters in the novel of Henry James. But of course I didn't make a copy of it. It was not at all a copy, but I could, it was a revelation for me, this influence. Then I think I answer to your question, because I said the other writers I loved, but I couldn't find the influence. But I have another novel, The Encounter, Întâlnirea. And Întâlnirea is obviously built with might of Odyssea, Ulysses. Yes. It was like the story of Ulysses put in my novel.
Ulysses. You're referring to
Ulysses.
James Joyce's Ulysses.
But not from James Joyce.
Right.
It was from Homer.
Homer, yeah.
The might of and probably for each book I could find an influence, unconscious or conscious. Conscious?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. This is and it is, I don't know what means inspiration, because as a writer you look around and sometimes something happen in your mind, but I'm not a writer who try to make this topic and that topic. I I wait for is not an inspiration but a theme which built in my mind.
Hi, my name is Oana Brevenel, and thank you again for your wonderful presentation. I can't wait to get my hands on your books. I wanted to ask about your opinion about the Romanian language and its future. What do you think? Is it a minority of people who are hoping that the Romanian language is going to keep its character as it used to be even before the revolution? Or, I mean, I know the language is a living thing and it's normal for it to change and to go through transformations. But what's the hope for us, and especially for the younger generation, to have a cleaner language? Or is it a good or a bad thing? I don't know. Thank you.
My colleagues, intellectuals, are worried about the future of Romanian language. I know this, and sometimes they want to make at television programs, but they don't succeed, to correct all the mistakes or, you know, English enter brutal, if I can say, in the structure of Romanian, like in the past time entered French or Greek or Turkey, so on. But perhaps it's not right to say that English enter, because it is the opposite phenomena. The people went to the English and carry on to Romanian what they found, and it is a language sometimes in some environments of the young people. It is a mixture of English words, very not enough adopted, and barbarism, what we say, and trivial words, very trivial, like in the street. Then this is for some young environment, the language, and of course our goal.
Yes,
our goal.
Dialects, idioms, yes, slang.
But, you know, as an academic you can think about this, but me as a writer, for me all these phenomena are very interesting. I am not, because even they are not cultural sounds, I like them. It's interesting for me, this concrete language. And I know that the language, as you said, is alive. The language is alive, and the language will move to another period. And I don't know which other language can influence. Perhaps Chinese in the future.
Can I just add there that Romanian is continually assimilating new words, so it's not as though the assimilated words take over the syntax of Romanian, it's the other way around. And therefore that's a clear sign that the language is still vibrant, is still generating from its own resources new words. So I'm very optimistic about the future of the language. The Romans back in the 1st and 2nd century had the same problem with Latin. They were complaining about the fact that people left off the end of the declensions, or feminine or masculine nouns. Well, at least in Romanian they still use feminine and masculine. So that's after 2,000 years. So there's still hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I enjoyed very much. I'm Nina Scribano, I'm a physician, I'm not a literary person, but I'm watching what's happening. Romania is not isolated in this phenomenon. For years I have been watching the French language, and actually the expression franglais came from France, and now it has exacerbated immensely, and the media are kind of supporting this, because one of the ways to correct this would be if the media would make some amends and try to put a more literary, civilized language. But I have been receiving adevărul for a while, and I was appalled of the language of the people who were writing to the editor. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it's not that English words. These were grossièreté. I'm going to use a French word.
Right.
It was absolutely, it was intolerable. So I think that also there should be some limits put, from the television, newspapers, to give some, not to accept certain things. That's the problem. And going back to the Româna franțuzită, that's another phenomenon which was not Romanian by excellence. It was actually Russian very much. You brought in Tolstoy. And Tolstoy, if you read War and Peace, you have to know French, because it's not in Russian, it's not in translation in another, it's in French. And the letter that Onegin wrote to Tatiana, Eugene Onegin, was in French. So that was a phenomenon which was espoused by the beau monde of Europe in those days, that you have to speak French and not the language. And there were some writers, the Romanians who were who brought the language of the land, to be used. But Romania follows with, all the other countries which surround, so it's not an exception. It's the time.
I'll take one more question, because we have some food waiting for us out there. So a final question for Gabriela.
There is no one.
People are hungry, I see. Yeah. Yes, could it be a short one then?
Was a very short.
Yeah.
Were your novels introduced on Thursday by the newspapers? There is this extraordinary phenomenon I notice in Romania, that every Thursday some newspapers, along with the newspaper, come a novel, literature. And I can see in the villages, in the houses as far as the mountains, that now they have a library, and beautifully brochured, very, very nicely presented. And there are also Romanian international books. Were yours presented to the kiosk in the street, and people stay since 5 o'clock in the morning to get the book for pennies compared to his dollars. So were yours there too?
I don't know if you... I don't think if... there's this series that adevărul produces of novels. I wondered if there are 11 Ron, aren't they, or something, yes. She asked whether your novel is
No, because I am an author of the Polyrom Publishing House, which is, I can say, more prestigious publishing house, but of course they sell more with the papers, and my rights are to the Polyrom, and I can say that all the publishers are very angry against this publisher of papers who make money, a lot of money in that way, because it seems that they don't pay all the taxes they had to, and there are another explanation. This is a good affair for them. And perhaps for the author, I think it is best for best affairs is for the publisher of papers. Yes, yes, of course.
Well, my warmest thanks to Gabriela for coming and sharing with us her thoughts and also the passages from her novel. I'd also like to thank the Romanian Embassy, the Romanian Cultural Institute, and of course Professor Jennifer Long and Eugene here, without whom we wouldn't have been able to mount the evening stage this evening, and also for all the technicians who have helped us record the event, and people will be able to see it up on YouTube, I understand. So thank you once again to all of you, and please enjoy the refreshments.